Hi guys, I'm excited about this one. Talyllyn No. 4 Edward Thomas, but in the fresh kerr Stuart lined grey livery. Fwah! Like I even need to point this out, but I'll be using the Fourdees body for this one. Being present era, it's got variations compared to the tattoo I used on corrish. And in classic Fourdees style, the top of the cab is a separate part. The chassis for this one is the ultra reliable Bachmann Peter Sam. I bought this one second hand and it's already shed its body before I received it. The first job this time is to carefully work around the model with a hobby knife, removing the print supports. These can be found around a fragile detail such as grab handles and, well, normal handles, assuming those aren't to be grabbed. I decided at this point to actually cut off the cab side grab handles, as I'm assuming the lining is going to be tricky enough on this one to apply without these getting in the way. I'll make new ones later. I drill holes through the cab sides where the future handles will attach, as this will give them more strength compared to just gluing them onto the sides of the model, which I used to do years ago. One thing I like to do with resin kits such as this one is to lightly sand the bottom of the top half of the cab. This is because I see quite a few of these being built with a rough join, sometimes with light being able to pass through. It's only a quick job really, and vastly improves the final look. See? Sits nice and flush now. The roof also needs work. This isn't exclusive to Fourdees, but to any 3D resin print. What I'm trying to do is sand it back enough to lose the print lines, as these are really obvious on the curved surfaces. The model's ready for paint now, so I'll attach the parts to cotton buds. The final livery is grey, so it should be pretty bold to use any primer that wasn't grey at this point, so I'll use that I guess. I was tempted to use the grey primer as the final coat, but I felt it was too dark. So after rummaging through my stock of slightly different shades of grey, no I don't have 50, 23 if you must know, I settled on this one. The final coat needs to be applied with an airbrush. Well, it doesn't need to be applied with an airbrush, but I want it to be applied with an airbrush. It gives a nice smooth finish. I can then begin the mammoth task of lining this beaut. I knew this was going to take some time as it had multiple sets per panel, but I'm pretty sure I can see my hair has grown visibly longer since I started the process of lining. I'm using fox transfers for this, and the process for the outside border will be very similar to the one used on other TR engines I've made. This sheet of transfers comes with both straight lines and different side corners. That's great, as the corners on this type of lining is a nice curve, and painting them by hand would make me so sad. Being waterslide transfers, I can add all the components to the panel at once, and then fine-tune their position after. The front of the tank needs lining as well, and luckily the set I've got came with random radius of white lines. I chose the one that fitted the tank shape closest, but even that needed encouraging to be the correct curve. It does help to work on a little bit at a time when you do this, and dry each completed section with a cotton bud to seal into place. With the outside border transfer on, I can go back over and do it all again for the inside lining. Again, this is quite time consuming as it needs to look square and even next to the outside lining. And what made it more time consuming for me was that I just wasn't happy with it when I finished the whole thing, so I took it off and redid it all. That was the right choice though, as if you compare this footage to the later shots, you'll see that I got the lining much closer to the edges of the panels the second time round. They really did a job on lining No. 4 in this livery, and lined every little detail and panel. That does mean that I need to do the same, including the rear cab sides. In this scale, this panel is a matter of millimeters wide, so this is a delicate job. Even cutting the pieces small enough takes some doing. Fine-tuning the final position of transfers is best done with something blunt such as cocktail sticks, as this will reduce the risk of tearing the transfers. The beauty of waterslide is that if you spot an error in the application after you've finished it, you can simply wet the surface and they'll loosen it from the model, and then you can correct it. And when that's done, and you're happy, as I am at this point, varnish is applied through the airbrush. This isn't the final coat of varnish, but simply one to seal the transfers as I work on the model. This will reduce the risk of me accidentally removing them with my almost super mutant sized hands. The varnish has dried, so I can begin hand painting the black borders. The transfers are white, black, white, but I only need them for the single white on the inside, so I can paint black up and over the outermost white and onto the black in the middle. This black in the middle actually helps get a tidy finish with the paint because it'll disguise my wobbly lines. I really enjoy this step of the model build. I think it's because the model takes a massive step forward when this one is done, and it's a fairly quick step to complete. I would say all it needs is a steady hand, but I don't have a steady hand, so basically all you need is black paint. I can now mask off the painted panel so I can fill in the rest of the black on the model. I always get concerned I'm going to pull away any transfers from the model with the masking tape. So, to reduce the potential stickiness, I press it down on the cutting mat before attaching it to the model. I can't be bothered to mask off the buffer beams, even though they need to be red, not black, so I'll cross that bridge when I get to it. The finish masking shows that I only tend to use masking tape on the edges of the model and then fill in the rest with tissue paper. This is fast, lacks the chance of pulling the transfers away from the surface, and most importantly, saves masking tape, which is quite expensive. Once again, the airbrush shows how fast this job can be. And it's even faster for me as I've been drying the coats with a hairdryer to get it all done within a few minutes. The black's done now, but I'll keep the masking in place, as I need to address the buffer beams. I'll simply add a few more pieces to mask off the black parts now. This is unexpectedly fiddly, as the model has lots of little details around the buffer beams, which means it's not a smooth finish to add the masking tape onto. To cancel out the black base that they now sport, the buffer beams are then coated with red oxide primer. Like the grey, I did once consider using this as the final colour for the buffer beams, but this red is too orange, and it just doesn't look right. So the buffer beams need a top coat of Italian red. This is the same red used for the red panels on the TR coaches, so it makes it a nice and consistent look to the stock running on the layout. When I'm painting the buffer heads, do take the time to notice the difference in the black seen on the panel borders compared to the footplate and the smokebox. I haven't spotted it at this point, but the buffer heads on number 4 aren't actually black, and look more to be machined. Don't worry, I'll see it soon. Now there we go, I've spotted it. So I'll go over the faces of the buffers once again, but this time with a metallic silver. I'm unsure if I'm happy with it at this point, as it looks very toy-like. We'll see. Anyway, the buffer heads need to be greased in the centres. And this is a tough look to get with an airbrush, so I first add a drop of black paint with the paintbrush. I then grab a cotton bud and dab the black spot. This results in a nice random and faded finish to the spot. It's all hand painting from now on, so the filler cap goes black. I painted this in the same technique as I do windows, where I paint from the centre towards the outside edge. And whilst the black's out, I can do the cab interior. My favourite thing about Fourdees kits is how the top half of the cab is separate. This means that painting the interior is really easy, and that you get a perfect join between the black and the cream sides. Care needs to be factored in here, as there is plenty of fine details to paint around without snapping them off in the process. One of the last jobs on the body is painting the brass pipework below the tank. Ironically, I use gold for this, and not brass, as brass is too brassy, and not as convincing as brass as gold is, which appears much more brass than brass. This pipework is a raised detail, so nice and easy to paint in. This can then be taken over the cab details such as the pipework. There's lots going on in such a small cab such as this, so it's best to refer to reference photos on the prototype to make sure you don't do anything daft. I ordered a full set of plates for number 4 months ago. In fact, it was before I knew that it was going to carry the Kerr Stuart grey livery, and I didn't know that it would only require the works plates from the set. Apparently, the reason for this on the real Edward Thomas is that the nameplates would ruin the look of the lining. Fair point. Plates are easy peasy to paint up, as they only require the middles painted black. When it's dry, the plates are very lightly filed on their faces. This removes the black paint from the raised detail, leaving a very good looking plate with black inners. It works for red plates also. The plates are cut out from their sheet and glued onto the model with a little drop of gluing glaze. I find once this is dry, it's perfectly strong enough to hold plates in place. I finished the top half of the cab as well, so just need to paint the interior in a cream. This needs a couple of coats to look smooth, but in all honesty you'll barely see it through the doors anyway. One of the only parts to paint in the top half of the cab were the window spectacle plates. Being a raised detail, the best approach to painting these is to paint towards the outside rim, which will minimise the paint getting onto the grey surrounding it. Fourdees provide lenses to pop into these. It is an amazing part of the kit, as making lenses is a job that I don't look forward to. It's not a difficult job, they just never look right glued onto the wall of the cab, whereas these ones are designed to fit inside the windows. A nice touch. With the windows done, the top of the cab can be glued onto the body. The two parts connect using a pin and socket system in the corners. It's actually quite a strong join when it's done. I can finally add the handrails back in that I removed in the first place. You can see how the lining passes straight over the holes, which would have been a nightmare to try and do with them in place. The handrails themselves are just bent up from some scrap pieces of metal that came with the corris and TR wagon kits. The body's looking about done now, but I still haven't done the chassis. Best crack on. I've half stripped it down by removing the 3 screws from underneath. Then I could pull the wheel sets and cylinder heads off. I usually spray the wheels as I do the body, but I keep getting told just to hand paint them, which should save time as I don't need to remove the rods and pins. I'll do it in the same technique as the body though, with the grey primer going on first, and then the top coat of grey. The cylinder heads will get lined in the same manner as the body. It's all looking good now, so every piece gets a final coat of satin varnish to seal it all in. I'll quickly wipe over the windows to remove the diffused look from the varnish. Yes, I'm aware that this is a brand new engine rebuild out of the works, so should be spotless. But I still use a very light black wash regardless. This will act as a subtle pin wash around details, as well as adding a little bit of general grime in areas where dirt would accumulate, even after a single run up the line. And remember, this is autumn, so it's probably rubbish weather. Oh yes, we need a crew as well. This is the Model U crew designed specifically for the tattoo engines. The nice thing about this is I very rarely use the figures designed for the model I'm building, and I usually have to fight to get the crew to stand on the footplate, so this one should be a treat to fit. I've painted them this time in a simple all over blue for their work clothes. The only thing I've altered is their shirt under the jacket and the colour of their hat. Right, my guys can go onto the footplate now, and that's done with a tiny drop of super gel to their feet and hand. Number 4 complete. Well, it's missing couplings at this moment, but I tend to do couplings in batches, so I'll do that at some point in the near future. I hope I've done this one justice, because as soon as I saw the photos of the real thing in this livery, I knew I was going to be a big fan. Number 4 does tend to look good in most liveries, and I do struggle to choose my favourite. Maybe that's because I'm a big fan of the tattoo in general. Anyway, you won't be able to tell on the video, but this one has taken a lot longer compared to the other engines, purely because of how fiddly the lining is. But it's another one ticked off. And just as I think I'm nearly on top of the engines that need to be built, 2 more have entered the chat this week. Anyway, thanks for watching. I trust you've used this time to have a break from reality and condition your soul. No? Okie dokie. Cheers.